Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. In South Korea, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping conclude their talks aimed at ending years of tariff war in South Korea. Both sides leave the site in Busan without speaking to reporters after 1 hour and 40 minutes of talks. Minutes before meeting Xi, Trump ordered immediate testing of America's nuclear weapons, a shock move that casts a shadow over the summit. It signals both deterrence and desperation as he tries to pressure Beijing. President Donald Trump says he's given South Korea approval to build a nuclear-powered submarine, a move that would put Seoul among an elite group of nations. The vessel will be built in a Philadelphia shipyard as Seoul agrees to buy more oil and gas. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva says the country cannot accept the scourge of organised crime after the deadliest police raid in Rio de Janeiro's history left at least 121 people dead. He calls for coordinated action against drug gangs that doesn't endanger police or civilians. President Nicolas Maduro says Venezuela intercepted 3 aircraft used for drug trafficking in operations that coincide with a massive US military deployment in the Caribbean. He touted the strikes as proof of Caracas's own anti-drug efforts amid growing regional tensions. And with 95% of ballots counted, Geert Wilder's far-right PVV party is neck and neck with the pro-European D66 party, each winning 26 seats in a tense Dutch election that could determine the country's next coalition government. Now, US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have concluded their first meeting in 6 years in Busan. Their initial comments made by Presidents Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have said that recent frictions are normal for the two biggest economies. However, the biggest economies in the world have left the site of the summit and have said that no announcement has been made yet. Of course, this is a huge development. Both Donald Trump and Xi Jinping have left the site, with Donald Trump leaving for Washington in Air Force One and President Xi Jinping leaving Busan in South Korea in his motorcade, neither of which spoke to reporters after much positive language prior to that meeting. US state media reported that the meeting should have lasted around 3 hours. The meeting only lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes. And now, of course, we wait and, of course, for news on that meeting. And now to discuss this is Stephen Nagy. He is a professor at the International Christian University, and he joins us live from Tokyo. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It's a pleasure to have you. Of course, this meeting was hugely anticipated. We've been waiting for this since January, since Trump took office. And there was hugely positive words going into this. I mean, from both presidents, from both sides. And Donald Trump, no stranger to the reporter's camera, he walked past those cameras and took to those steps of Air Force One without saying a word to any of the press. What does that signal?
So, Thomas, thank you very much for having me. And I think it's important for us to understand that the political dynamics and environment of these two countries couldn't be more different. Mr. Trump can be a showman. He can, say things in a way that his counterpart, President Xi Jinping, could never say. So there's not the flexibility. Um, the meeting was shorter, an hour and 40 minutes. They complimented each other. They talked about the challenges within the relationship. But the fact that I think President Trump went directly into Air Force One, he didn't comment to the media. He didn't do what he normally does, whether that's boasting or talking about a great deal or talking about how they're going to have a great deal. Didn't do that. Suggests that he may not have got the takeaways that he was expecting. Um, and should be no surprise. President Xi's economy is in very bad shape. He has increasingly domestic challenges back home, and there's really no incentive on the Chinese side to bargain with the United States at this particular stage.
Yes, and of course there were three main sticking points when it came to this. Of course, centering around trade, we have rare earths, which of course the Chinese have put restrictions on. We have tariff threats from Donald Trump, and we have a possible TikTok deal, which was set to be transferred over to American hands, which will of course allow that hugely popular social media app to still be present in the United States. Where do you think the main point of contention was here? Where do you think the main tensions arose in this meeting? Now, earlier in this week, we did see both Chinese and US officials agree to that framework deal. Where did issues arise?
You know, I'm not. I don't think it was TikTok whatsoever. I think really it was revolved around tariffs and rare earth materials. From the U.S. side, rare earth materials and not only getting the rare earth materials themselves, but the processing and getting them to the United States is incredibly important for defense technologies. Airplanes, iPads, all kinds of technology. But again, in particular for the defense industry that uses these rare earth materials en masse. And it appears that the Chinese really haven't loosened up their monopolization of both the processing and the mining. And this creates a challenge in terms of the United States and how it moves forward in terms of bilateral relations. On the Chinese side, tariffs are hurting. There's already downward structural pressures on the Chinese economy. We think youth employment is above 20%. We think that the property market has really gone bust. And we think there's general economic malaise in China at the aggregate level. Of course, there's stars in the economy, as there'd be stars anywhere. So the Chinese want tariff relief, and they want it now. The Americans want rare earth access, and neither side's willing to budge until there is a concrete agreement to reduce tariffs and to have access to rare earth materials. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. Do stay with us as we have further updates from, of course, our top story of the hour. We have Taiwanese Foreign Minister Ling Chia-lung saying that Taiwan was confident in its relations with the United States. The Taiwanese Foreign Minister made these remarks ahead of the high-level meeting between the US and Chinese presidents, where the issue of the island Beijing claims as its own may have come up. Since taking office this year, US President Donald Trump has vacillated on his position towards Taiwan while pursuing a trade deal with Beijing. Trump says Chinese President Xi Jinping has told him that he will not invade while the Republican president is in office. But Trump has yet to approve any new US arms sales to Taipei. Okay, we of course are discussing the top story of the hour, the meeting between Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this meeting concluded after 1 hour and 40 minutes with trade at the top of the agenda. However, national security, of course, there as well. Now joining us is Ross Feingold. He is a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, from the Taiwanese capital, we've just read out the Taiwanese foreign minister's statement He said that he was confident in its relations with the United States and that he was confident that Donald Trump was going to bring up the issue and, of course, the threat of a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan. How do you think that this issue would have gone down with Xi Jinping when raised by US President Donald Trump, when they were face to face?
Well, of course, we don't know who actually raised it. I think the more common assumption is that Xi Jinping and the Chinese side would take the initiative to raise this rather than the U.S. side, especially given President Trump's focus on trade issues and rather than focusing on a number of other issues that typically come up in U.S.-China relations. So normally in these meetings, regardless of who the U.S. president is, one would expect Xi Jinping to reiterate China's position that Taiwan is part of China and that other countries, especially the United States, shouldn't interfere in relations between China and Taiwan, including with regard to weapon sales or other things that the U.S. does to show its support for Taiwan that makes China unhappy or even angry. So often these conversations tend to follow a standard script with the U.S. side saying we haven't changed our policy towards Taiwan. We maintain our one China policy, but we're still going to have unofficial relations with Taiwan, including weapon sales. As far as the reaction from the Taiwan government, which you mentioned, of course, they're going to have to say something positive. They're not going to say that we're worried about what Xi Jinping or Donald Trump will say about us. And of course, they're going to say we expect or we hope the United States will continue to support us. So it's understandable that the Taiwan government is going to put a very positive spin and reiterate that there's no changes to U.S. support for Taiwan.
Yes, and of course, Ross, we saw, as we've said previously, a trade framework agreed earlier this week, and we also saw, but what we did see today was, of course, the United States resume nuclear testing. This was in response to the Chinese doing something of the same. Donald Trump also gave South Korea approval to build a nuclear-powered submarine. Does this signal, could security in the Indo-Pacific have been where tensions arose here, particularly given the time frame?
The interesting thing there is that despite the happy faces and the handshakes and agreements on trade, we know inevitably that the U.S. and China are going to clash over what we could broadly call political issues, things outside the trade space, although in recent times these things overlap and they can't be separated. But there's an arms race in the region. We know that. Japan is going to significantly increase its defense spending under new prime minister. It has already been increasing it in recent years and will continue to do so now. The South Korea president, although he talks about rapprochement with North Korea, he also seems committed to increase defense spending as well, most notably, as you mentioned, with this potential arrangement with the U.S. to acquire nuclear technology for submarines. Australia is increasing its defense spending. The U.S. has significantly increased its defense budget for 2026. A lot of that money will be spent in the Indo-Pacific. And now we have President Trump talking about U.S. nuclear weapons, which, frankly, a lot of experts have been calling for the U.S. to significantly increase its investments in the nuclear weapons capabilities, because some of the technology, some of the weapons themselves, the facilities, they haven't gotten the modernization that they actually really do need in recent decades. So there's been an underinvestment in that space. And I'm sure President Trump has been briefed about that repeatedly by both civilian as well as military officials. The timing of the announcement is certainly interesting, and obviously that was meant to kind of put some pressure on China going into the meeting. But this would have happened anyway under President Trump.
Okay, Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on the program, as always. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has also left for the 32nd APEC Economic Leaders Summit as well in Gwangju, and a state visit to South Korea at the invitation by South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. Xi's entourage, which includes Kan Kui, a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, and the Director of the General Office of the CPC Central Committee, Wang Yi, a member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Foreign Minister, and Lai Feng, a member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Vice Premier. Okay, we're now joined by Stephen Neji once again. What more can you tell us about the APEC summit, what it holds, its geopolitical significance, what they're expected to discuss, etc. Of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to attend it. Now he is done meeting with President Donald Trump. What can we expect from the days ahead?
Thanks very much, Thomas. Again, this idea of the Asia-Pacific Economic Community was, founded in 1989 by a former Australian Prime Minister, diplomat, who thought that it was important that the region, the Asia-Pacific region, had to harmonize their regulation, deregulate, find ways to engage in currency regulation, and again, find ways to, in general, to make their economies work better. But the 1989 Asia-Pacific economy certainly isn't 2025. China is the number 2 largest economy. Japan is number 4. India is rising very, very quickly, and it's not in the Asia-Pacific economic community. So we have a lot of issues to discuss, and it's not just going to be about harmonization and deregulation. It's going to be about how to manage the biggest challenge, is that's U.S.-China competition. We want to prevent the world from bifurcating into a China-centered global economy and a so-called U.S.-centered global economy. We want to figure out how to include rising powers such as India. Where do they fit within this process, and do they want to be part of it? And we need to think about global trade in general. Since China joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization, in 2001, really trade has been distorted, and it's disrupted the middle classes in many countries. And this is not to blame China, rather its size warps trade. That's just the reality. So the leaders want to come together. They want to find how to stabilize the U.S.-China relationship. They want to find ways to include India. And again, they want to find ways to stabilize the global economy and start to, again, make the economies work for the middle class, not just in the United States in terms of making America great again, but in terms of making all middle classes great again. Because we've really seen a hard, we've seen countries become poorer. We've seen middle classes shrink since the COVID-19 pandemic. And, Indonesia is a good example of this. But not only Indonesia, Canada, United States, others as well, have had real problems since the COVID-19 pandemic. And APEC may be a solution, or we may need to develop an APEC 2.0 that reflects the new realities of the 2025 economies.
Thank you very much for that insight. Stephen, do stay with us. We finally have those Trump comments coming in after that meeting with Xi Jinping. And he has spoken with reporters on board Air Force One, saying that among other agreements on fentanyl and soybeans, the United States and China have now settled the rare earth minerals issue, a core contention at the heart of the trade standoff between the world's 2 largest economies. President Trump has also announced another trip to China in April 2026, which will be followed by President Xi's visit to the United States. On the tariff issue, President Trump has now said that the agreement has been extended for 1 year, with tariffs on China set to drop from 57% to 47%. Interestingly, Trump has said that Taiwan did not figure in the bilateral talks with the Chinese president. Among other things, talks between Trump and Xi centered on the major conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, with Trump saying that China will be working with the United States to solve the Ukraine conflict. Stephen, some huge statements there coming from Donald Trump. It seems like the meeting indeed went well, even though it was a short meeting. What do you think investors will be responding to this? And of course, now deals have been made for this soybeans issue, which will put huge relief on American farmers, along deals with fentanyl and the rare minerals issue as well. What is the significance for the global economy, not just the Chinese and American one, when it comes to global trade after this announcement?
So, Thomas, thanks very much. Really, I think proof is in the pudding, and we should remember that Mr. Trump said he would solve the Ukraine-Russia climate day one, and Russia-Ukraine war at day one, and we're still here fighting to make that happen. So I think we really have no certainty in terms of any of these deals. We'll have to wait until we actually see shifts in rare earth material supplies. Are they coming back online? Are they penalty free? Is the United States able to do what it wants? And will the United States actually lower the tariffs? So if they do that, then I think the markets will respond very positively. They will say this is good. U.S.-China relations have stabilized in the short term, and that we can start to reinvest in the regions in a more predictable way. But as you mentioned, a potential Trump visit in April to China, that is a long ways away in political talk. And then, of course, Xi Jinping reciprocating that. There's a lot ahead that we need to think about before these positive signals actually become a reality. So I'm very, very cautiously optimistic that some of this may translate into positive news for the markets. But we should be very realistic about how much progress has been made in that hour and 40-minute talks between President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump.
Yes, Stephen Nagy, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight on these issues. And now that's a wrap on the China Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.